Joe Hopkins here, and like the title says, right? Let's talk about drugs. And why, man? This is a music channel. Well, I'm a musician. I've been a musician my whole life, and anybody that is a musician or hangs around with musicians, you spend enough time around musicians, you spend a lot of time around people that do drugs, man. It's just the way it is, right? And it doesn't seem to matter what kind of music you do. Right? I've played in metal bands, punk bands, straight up and down rock bands, funk, country. I've played around gospel musicians and folk musicians and been around drugs, okay? Folk, you know, they're kind of hippie and all, but you think gospel music, right? No, it's there. The Christian music scene, it's there, right? And that, as a musician, that's been my calling in life. But I've worked professionally in correctional institutions for over 2 decades. And in that vein, I've been around a lot of drugs, right? There's a lot of drugs in prison, okay? So I figured I'd talk about it because it's something that's getting really, really weird these days. Right, man? When I was in high school and right after high school, I did some drugs. Weed and speed, man. And that's about it. That was the extent of my experience. But I was around a lot of people that did a lot more. You know, PCP, LSD, shrooms, heroin, Molly, you know, the ecstasy, all that kind of stuff. Pretty much, you name it, coke, crack, all of it, right? Meth, all of it. I've been around all of it before I ever started working in prisons. And since becoming, since working in corrections, man, I've seen a ton of it, but it's changed. It's changed over the years, right? And yeah, this is a little bit of a rant, but it has changed over the years, and it's gotten really, really weird. It was bad enough when I was younger that, yeah, I got dosed a time or two where I did something I didn't expect to because people, they mix stuff. You go smoke weed, sometimes they put PCP in it. Sometimes they put LSD in things. You know, you go to a party and shit happens, right? And that's bad enough. But things have changed. And I know you guys hear about it on the news, the whole opiate crisis, right? Fentanyl, that kind of stuff. I had a friend who became a heroin addict, right? Man, in high school, we'd smoke weed. Well, he graduated from weed to other things and found heroin. And that's back when, if you were a heroin addict, it could kill you, right? But the buffer between too much and dead, it was a pretty good margin. And the longer you did it, the higher your tolerance got, the closer that margin got. Until one day, he overdosed, right? And died. And that happens. But it used to take, for like heroin addicts, it used to take years, decades sometimes, to get to the point where you overdose and die. And then fentanyl came along, and they start putting fentanyl in your junk. And that margin between too much and dead starts getting real small right off the bat. And it's killing people. But there's other stuff that is really, really freaking me out. People are mixing all kinds of stuff together. I don't know if any of you out there have heard of K2, right? It started out as like this synthetic marijuana. And then legislators will like outlaw part of it. It was legal. K2 and Spice and the other synthetic marijuanas they used to sell were pretty lightweight stuff at first, but every time somebody legislates, makes one of the ingredients in that illegal, they change the formula so it's legal again, right? Used to see the ads for that stuff in like the magazines, like High Times and stuff, like the legal weed, they would call it. Well, they kept changing the recipe, and then legislators would make this illegal, and then they changed the recipe. Well, over the years, that stuff's gotten weird. And here's the thing. In prison, that stuff gets in there. And yeah, it started to get weird because sometimes these guys would smoke this stuff and they'd just chill out. Sometimes these guys would smoke this stuff and freak out and try to like eat their cellmate, you know, like biting people, get real combative, real crazy. It became a problem. You know, sometimes they get suicidal, really violent. The one dude, man, we opened up the cells for rec time, and some dude runs out, tries to hang himself. Not very successfully, mind you. Keep in mind, this fat dude runs out with an electrical cord wrapped around his neck, and the thing's only like this long. Well, he runs out, throws it over the railing, didn't tie it, didn't secure it, and then just jumps over the railing. Well, needless to say, he just went right down to the floor. Didn't hurt himself that bad. It's, you know, it was second floor, but he jumped from. But he certainly didn't hang himself. But he thought he was. He thought he was hanging himself. I shouldn't be funny, but you know, it kind of is. But anyways, this stuff gets crazy. Well, time goes on, and the stuff gets weirder and weirder. And now we got this stuff, yellow K, man. That's what they call it. They're like, it's like a liquid K2. They're soaking paper in, and they smoke it. And I wonder why do people do these drugs? Because that stuff is a god-awful mess. It's not a pleasant high. And I know because, unfortunately, if you touch this stuff, it can soak through your skin, it would seem, because numerous employees where I work have come into contact with the stuff and been accidentally dosed. That's a hospital trip, man. It messes you up real quick. Fentanyl was bad enough. I mean, we've had to deal with fentanyl. Fentanyl can absorb through the skin and through certain gloves. We've had to change what gloves we use because it'll soak through some of them. And the next thing you know, you got 2 officers going to the hospital. You got a nurse going to the hospital because they touched the wrong thing. And this stuff, this yellow K is doing the same thing. Like jacks their heart rate way up. Gets them real confused. They don't know what the hell's going on. It's getting scary, and I'm wondering, why are people doing these drugs? The high doesn't seem pleasant. It doesn't seem fun. I see the dudes when they're on the stuff, and I see the dudes when they're coming off the stuff, and it just seems like a miserable damned experience. Like, this is not a fun drug. And I mean, good Lord, man. Meth was bad enough. Remember meth when everybody was doing that, and you know certain areas I'd go to, and it just looked like The Walking Dead, man. Like tweakers just zombied out, staggering around, freaking out at people for no reason. It was weird. God help you if anything happens and you got to go to an emergency room, because you always got at least 2 people freaking out in the corner. You know what I mean? But yeah, man. And but these guys, they smoke this stuff, and then they think they're dying, and they freak out, and they get weird pains, and the next thing you know, they're going up to medical. And the crazy thing with this, right, with fentanyl, if some dude was overdosing, we got Narcan, right? You can give them a couple shots up the nose of that spray, and the next thing you know, they're fine, right? Or at least fine-ish. Kind of counteracts the opiate. But this stuff, Narcan don't affect this. And, you know, they give them a couple sprays and nothing, so they end up going to the hospital. So, you know, and I just wonder if anybody has any ideas why. Why in the world would you do stuff that would, I mean, oh, my God. I've talked to people that have done heroin, and I kind of get it, right? I haven't tried it. I have no interest in it. But they say that first high is amazing. The first couple highs are amazing, right? The one guy, he described it as it's like pure love. You are loved and understood. So I get it. But then you get addicted and you start chasing that high. But I get the initial appeal, right? I get the initial appeal of meth. You get lots of energy without having to eat or sleep. And for some people, that's really appealing. You want to get a lot done? Meth. You want to party all night and party all day and just keep partying? Meth. I get it. Ecstasy, I get that. Seems like, hey, everything feels great. Everything sounds great. You know, I get it, man. It sounds like a fun time, right? Not, like I said, I'm not really into drugs. I'm kind of a health conscious kind of dude, and I'm not, you know, I like to drink some beer, but I'm not trying to mess my body and mind up too bad there. But I get the appeal. Let me put it that way. I understand why you would. But some of this newer stuff, man, I don't get the point. You end up freaking out, have a heart rate of like 200 just sitting there. get paranoid, freaky, violent, combative, and then go to the hospital. It does not sound like a good time, like at all. There's doesn't seem to be an upside, you know, especially when there's so many other drugs that seem like a lot more fun. Why this stuff? If anybody has an idea, comment, man. Leave me a comment. I'm talking about it because I don't think people really understand how many weird drugs there are. We were hearing about bath salts on the news some time ago. You remember that, the whole bath salts thing? And it's like a synthetic drug that would like freak people out, and then they get violent and try to eat people and crazy crap like that. This is like that. It's along those lines. Why in the world would you want to do something like that? Just boggles my mind. It doesn't sound fun. I know I've said that a lot. It doesn't sound fun, but it doesn't. And, you know, there's a lot of really weird drugs out there now. And you never know what's in it. They're putting fentanyl in everything, man. Far too often, man, people get some weed. They smoke it. They think they're just smoking weed. And the next thing you know, they fall out. And once again, man, Narcan, hospital trip, you know, you don't know what's in anything anymore. Fortunately for marijuana, a lot of states are legalizing it so that you can get regulated pot. At least you know it's just pot, you know. I think those days are behind me. I'm not really looking to get high anymore. I'm not my thing these days. But, you know, I get it, though. I can understand it. And it is, at least you know what you're getting if you're going to be into that kind of thing, right? You can go to a dispensary and you know it's just weed. But a lot of this stuff, you don't know what's in it. And even the stuff that's skirting the law, that's legal, right? Like Spice and K2, and where they're trying to keep it within legal restrictions or whatever, you don't know what's in it. You don't know what it's going to do. Even when and a lot of states have just outlawed it, right? Synthetic drugs of any kind. But even when it was legal, I'd watch these guys in the prison, man. Like I said, one batch is fine, and the next batch would freak them out. You don't know what you're getting from one purchase to the next. So it just seems like kind of a dicey gamble. Especially since, and this is what I don't get. It seems like it would be just as easy to smuggle weed in as it would that other stuff. I don't know what the point is. But there you go. I thought I'd mention it because it's in the news. All this drug stuff. And if any of you guys out there are thinking of trying different drugs, man, there's a lot of things you can do to party and have a good time that isn't going to kill you, right? Be careful. Be careful what you're doing. And lay off the opiates. My God. That stuff will ruin your life like you wouldn't believe. I've seen it firsthand. I've had people die from it. I've lost 2 friends to opiates, right? So take my word for it, man. That shit ain't worth it. And Coke is getting popular again, like really popular, right? I know way too many people that are doing Coke these days, which is, I don't know, man. I don't want to be that up. Let me put it that way. Up and frantic doesn't sound like something I'd want right now, but I guess if that's your thing, that's your thing. But I mean, stuff's starting to get popular again that hasn't been for a long time. PCP's getting big again, and I hadn't really heard much about that since like, I don't know, early 2000s, late 90s, around there. It seemed to just disappear. Like nobody did that stuff anymore. Now everybody's interested again. I don't get it. So anyway, just thought I'd rant about that. The whole, I don't know, do I sound old? I don't know. I don't get the whole drug thing. I didn't get it back then, really. I mean, honestly, weed I could see, some uppers I could see. I couldn't really understand a lot of the others, right? Just my opinion, though. But anyway, so that's my opinion on that. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I love you guys. Peace out, baby. Bye-bye.